this, is there any sort of direct feedback to the bike controls?
Yeah.
In terms of what you're doing. So
If you brake, I mean, I presume with the engine's not running in close place like this, but you know that if you're braking, the front suspension goes down and things like that. I'm at the Motorcycle Live Show and we're looking at the Apex Motorcycle Simulator, which is something that has been introduced quite recently to try and improve the safety skills of new riders. I'm with MPC Ian Harvey from Devon and Cornwall Police, and this is your baby, isn't it? Can you explain a little bit about how this all came about, how it works, what it is that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of the police motorcycle instructors for Devon and Cornwall. Originally, I started looking at how we instruct and whether there's a safer way to effectively do it one-to-one with a motorcyclist. And unlike a car, as you know, we can't pull alongside a motorcyclist, pull the handlebars or apply the brakes for them. By the time you speak to them through their headsets, we could be 40 or 50 feet down the road, some of the speeds we do that. So I looked at originally how we do our police training, how you can incorporate blue light training into that, for instance, safely with zero risk, and that's how this originally came about. It soon became apparent once we tested it and worked with Project Apex and started introducing it to our colleges and universities, that's where it's at, is applying another layer of training, if you like, to a pre-CBT rider. So effectively, if you look at inherently in history, how do you go out and get an historical picture of what's likely to happen on the road without actually going out on the road? There is no current way to do it, is there? So we can watch videos, and the age group or the age demographic that this is aimed at, if you think about, they've grown up with Xboxes and PlayStations and all that sort of thing, and the tech on their phones. This is very much something they learn from, the current tech that's available. And this is only going to improve. This is the first of its kind in the trial models.
Yeah. So from obviously the majority of the audience that we reach are experienced riders. So they're going to be already licence holders. Do you see that there's any opportunity for this to be of use to an experienced rider, or is it something that you think needs to be clearly focused on the new and inexperienced people?
No, not at all. If you think some riders, I'm not talking about everybody, I don't generalise in that. Some riders put their bikes away in September, October, and don't like to ride through the winter, don't have to ride through the winter, might only get the bikes out in March, April. And I know some people don't do that, but those that do it, how do we keep their skills fresh? And this is something that has no time constraints. So we can take it into clubs, for instance, in the evenings. Everybody gets to have a ride of it. Just keep your mind fresh with skills of hazard perception. The term of never too old to learn applies to us all, doesn't it? I'm quite lucky in that I've had thousands of pounds spent going through police courses. Not everybody gets that opportunity, but certainly from a police's point of view, for engagement tool for us to help bikers, even with little nuggets of information that we can give whilst they're riding along on this, it's a work in progress, I know that, but it's something for a starter to prove the concept of whether simulators will work. And if you think pilots have done it for years, and if you think what we do as a motorcyclist, you do things independently with your hands and your feet, and you have to react to what you see and hear, and that's no different with a motorcyclist, is it?
So, I mean, I suppose some people might criticise it and sort of like say, well, how can you learn how to ride a motorcycle by playing a computer game?
Yeah.
Is there anything that is distinct in terms of this simulator from, say, an arcade game that you motorcycle racing game that you play?
Yeah. So this is a little bit more developed than a computer game. This isn't to replace motorcycle training in any way, shape or form. This is another layer of training that we can add in that ourselves as either police instructors or a civilian instructor can stand next to you and talk to you and point things out on the screen whilst the student's riding along or whilst the person that chooses to have a go. This isn't to replace motorcycle training, it's to add another layer of safety in. The safer you are at the beginning, if we front load young riders, I feel that we will benefit 4 or 5 years down the line, and we will all start to see better car and bike riders. And ultimately, we are trying to improve that safety blanket that keeps us all alive. And it might be, you know, we can never measure prevention, but ultimately, I would rather someone have those little nuggets of information that you or I probably went out and learnt the hard way, that they don't have to now. There's another layer of training available for this.
Yeah. I suppose from my perspective, one of the things that often concerns me is that there's always this push for, we've got to be evidence-led, and we've got to be able to prove the case before any money will be invested in a project. So for something like this, which is quite different, and as you say, the impact of it could be quite a long way down the road, how do you actually justify it from a funding perspective?
So we were lucky enough with Project Apex had some money available for new and innovative ideas to prevent motorcycle casualties. My theory behind this, if you like, is we need to restart the process. Having a CBT that's a day long, for instance, 2 days potentially, where you're doing no hazard perception or highway code training and you're allowed out to practice effectively amongst the rest of us. I don't feel that's fair on the rider, but feel that's fair on the rest of the motoring public, and that's just my opinion, is that actually give them better training now, give them better training up front, help the schools to develop their training so that they are, the quality that they're giving them is more intensive, if you like, and that will benefit all of us later on down the line. It's not about, we're not going to see immediate results, but we have to start somewhere, and we have to almost, if you like, press the reset button. If you think from when the CBT was incepted to what it is now, there's 22 million more cars on the road, as well as all the other vehicles, and hazards are changing all the time, aren't they? And ultimately, this is something, for instance, if you have a set of roads that causes you certain problems in certain areas, you can have them recreated. So you can actually take a student on it, look at the hazards that you're likely to come across on a daily basis without actually taking anybody out on the real road. You're using no fuel, it's a little bit greener. And if somebody's taking longer to learn, then they spend longer on this, getting practice before they go anywhere near a real bike.
The technology that goes into this, obviously all the computer simulations and how that mimics the real world. We all know that computer technology is advancing all the time. How close do you think this simulation is to the real world? How much further do you think technology will take us towards making the two look pretty much the same?
Yeah, I mean that's the current one at the moment, and bear in mind this is probably now 12 months old. CDG graphics, obviously, it's you can create the vehicles to do anything you want them to do. So they'll swerve in front of riders. So the behaviour that you can introduce through other vehicles, for instance, on here, are real life. Anything can be created. So if I was to say to you as a student, I'm going to take you out tomorrow and we're going to go and find somebody that's going to pull out of a junction on us, you'd probably look at me as if I've got 3 heads, and it's not safe, is it? But ultimately we can stop, pause the ride, talk through what we're about to go into and talk them through a hazard. So it's better prepared, they're better prepared. So we can talk to them about moving, the front wheel moving, for instance. Don't look at the driver, look at the front wheel. If the front wheel starts to move, we've got a problem. Where would you then aim? And those sorts of things. Speed of approach is a huge one actually for, I've identified with young riders. It's very difficult at the moment, I suppose, to get a true reflection of speed on this. You have to look down at your speedo, and you have to gauge with vehicles. It's very true to life, but unfortunately the tendency is to go faster than they should. But that then shows them things like closing gaps quickly and how speed reflects into that. Whereas if I sit in a classroom and talk to a group of 16, 17, 18-year-olds and say, I'm going to talk to you about road safety, very often they lose interest in that because it's police officer talking about road safety, I'm not interested. But actually showing them firsthand what they're likely to experience and how they're likely to experience it. And that then leads into then controlling the bike, just operating things like indicators, using mirrors. And adding to this, you can use a set of eye tracking glasses, for instance, which shows me lifetime where a student is looking on the screen. So if we talk about hazards, have you seen, and they say yes or no, I know exactly whether they have or they haven't, or they're looking at it, and whether they're focusing on it and for how long. So the technology is there to help us all. And again, what we were talking about with the older rider, that's a fantastic bit of kit that we can take into schools or clubs or things like that, where the older rider actually wants a bit of a brush up on skills.
Yeah.
If you think about when we pass our test, for a lot of us, it's probably the last time you do anything to do with further training. So unless they go and get advanced or something along those lines, we don't generally tend to do it because we're not forced into it. It's not mandatory, and it costs us money. So we spend money on helmets and gloves and boots and shoes and everything else. And actually, when was the last time we ever spent any money on ourselves? And for me, the more training you can receive, even if it's something virtual like this, where we can give little nuggets of information as advanced riders to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And if they practice it on here, they build up a library of experience that actually when they go out in the real world and they think to themselves, I'm not going to ride too close to a stationary vehicle in case the door opens. And that might be something we've told them, but you can actually recreate on here with no risk.
Yeah. From my perspective, obviously, this is a great piece of kit. I can see the benefits of what it can deliver. But I suppose the big question is scale. You've only got one of these simulators at the moment. We know, for example, that I think it's something like 170, 180,000 CBT certificates are given out each year. How are you ever going to get to the point where you can be delivering it at that sort of scale?
Yeah, it's and this is our next target, isn't it? Really, if we've proven something is. So the evaluation process at the moment that we've taken it into colleges and schools, and they've said, yes, we will engage with it, yes, we've enjoyed it, yes, it's something that we find interesting and we can learn from it. So that part of the evaluation is done. And I think now the next part would be to see whether some students would benefit from it and some that don't benefit from it, and see the difference in their level of training, and give us a true reflection of whether or not these things are going to work. It's all a learning process at the moment. For me, the CBT can be changed now. It's got to be done at government level, and we've got to say that actually a 16-year-old's life is valuable, and we've got to give them more training, better training, and that's no detriment to the schools. They are delivering the syllabus that is required at the moment. Well, let's change that. Say actually, there's a better way. There's a newer way of doing something. And ultimately, it saves everybody money in the long run, doesn't it? So it saves money for road traffic collisions, insurers, but the ultimate aim is to stop youngsters dying, almost like it's dying on the road, because there are far too many. In Devon and Cornwall, we had a horrendous year in 2022, and to have over 200 killed and seriously injured just in our force area for 1 year was just madness. And that's where I started looking at this, thinking there's got to be another way to make people safer. And whilst it's not mandatory to have to go and do further training, let's make it mandatory to do more training at the beginning then.
Yeah. So I think from how I understand it, the sensible sort of trajectory for this is to have simulators like this in established training schools. Clearly that's going to be an enormous investment for training schools, which means that they're either going to have to swallow that cost or they're going to have to pass it on to their customers.
Yeah.
Obviously I can't put you on the spot, but I would argue that there's a case for government subsidy involved here. Do you think, I mean obviously we've heard the new government is claiming it's going to put together a road safety strategy, first in however many years, because we haven't had one for some time. And I'm always conscious that there seems to be very little clearly marked out funding when it comes to motorcycle safety. Do you think this is something that we can say, well, here's the business case, here's the amount of money that we need to be invested by the government so that we can have these things rolled out at scale?
Yeah.
Do you think that is pie in the sky thinking, or do you think there's any potential for that?
Well, realistically, I think we've got we've got to take a long look at ourselves and the industry, the motorcycle industry. We are losing hundreds of bikers each year. That's cost, apart from the devastation that it causes families, the financial costs. We make up 1% of the motoring community and over 20% of fatal and serious injuries. That we have to get that down somehow. And for me, introducing new innovation now that will help us do that, achieve it. 5 years down the line, we're going to reap the benefits. How we get them into schools, I think now we've got a working model of what we want to achieve and a starter for 10, if you like. I'm sure there are, and I probably haven't touched the surface yet, I'm sure there are companies out there in the UK, for instance, that have their technology already in place for things like the graphics. We've got some bike manufacturers that might want to get involved, help us with the motorcycles for each unit, so that actually then people can get used to riding different models. And bear in mind, with this one we can change it from an auto, for instance, into a manual bike. So if you're going from an auto onto a manual, you can do that sort of training. And there's loads of different things available on here, things like test tracks. You can just ride around the test tracks. We've had a few in this week that never ridden a bike before, just wanted to get used to setting off, stopping, setting off and stopping. So it's basics like that, where these things come in use. And like I said, it's not to replace. To roll that scheme out, yes, it's going to cost a lot of money up front, but I'm fairly confident that if we can get the right unit for the right price and we can put them into rider training schools, everybody will benefit. Bear in mind, you don't have to do bikes, you can do cars. You can put car drivers on this to give them a perspective of what a motorcyclist feels like, how vulnerable we are. There's so many different things that can be done with this. I might not get a car driver when I come out on a real bike with me, but actually at the show this week, we've had car drivers jump on it and just said, just ride an auto, see how you feel. When everything starts to shut down, it goes dark. And that's another thing. We don't learn to ride in the dark, do we? So we can make it a nighttime escape. We can turn all the lights off in the classroom. And all of a sudden, the rider gets a perspective of what it's like to ride at night with no look, can't see the controls. All they can see is the light in the dash and how little the headlight lights up on the road. So just that perspective alone, the first time some of these youngsters may go out might be to a fast food restaurant. From certainly in Devon and Cornwall, we have lads and ladies riding in from farms. The first time they might ride at night is when they're going out by the fence. So again, just perspective of those sorts of things gives you an ability to throw all sorts of scenarios at them, and they can just be basic scenarios. They don't need to be difficult stuff, but it's stuff you and I would have gone out and inherently learned by mistake. We don't have to make those mistakes anymore.
So what's the immediate future for this? I mean, obviously you've had the funding to put this together.
Yeah.
There's a cost implication of taking it around the country, showing it and using it in different places. How long is that funding in place for? Is it something that is under review, shall we say, or is it relatively secure for the future?
Yeah, I mean, Project Apex is ongoing at the moment. The evaluation for this will be out the middle of next year, so we'll know then the true reflection of what anybody who's ridden it has scanned the QR code and has given us their own feedback. And we tend to, with the college age students, we'll give them pre and post survey. And then I see it going into a rider training establishment and maybe look at a group of riders that has this experience and some that don't, and then look at what we glean from that, what information we can glean from that, and ultimately where we can put it to most use. Simulators, like I say, have been used by pilots for years. Why would we not use this technology for something, for a car or a bike? In Japan, they've now started using these for 30 hours for a student before they're allowed anywhere near a road. Now, if they're starting to do that in other countries, let's start to do it ourselves.
And is you say in Japan, obviously there's a requirement for a certain number of hours on the simulator before student goes on the road, is that across the board for every single new rider?
As I understand it,
Yeah, so obviously they've obviously already addressed that hurdle of getting this out at scale.
yeah.
Have you got any kind of idea as to what sort of numbers? I mean, how many simulators do you need to cover, 100,000 population, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen in the schools, they've put 4 or 6 of these in a row with instructors, and the one instructor can instruct several riders at once. They're all riding the same scenarios, for instance. So like in here, you have 4 students. You can just swap them over, and the other students will look at the screen inside, and we can talk through what we're doing. So even if they're not riding, they are learning.
Yeah.
And that's if we put these in a static environment, we only put this in a truck so we can actually move it around the country and let other forces use it.
Yeah.
So the scheme that we have in place now is that I will start training other officers around the country to use it, and then it will be available. There's already another service talking to me about having one of these in the north of the region, north of the country, later on next year. So if we could roll them out and we can start getting a bit more use, we can really then kind of emphasise how much use these can become.
Yeah.
So realistically, we've got to look at each driving school, how much they're going to have to invest, how much or level of investment, I suppose, that we could get from other sources. Ultimately, if we can reduce the collisions, it's going to save us money later on down the line. But it's how much we can put up front now. So
yeah. Obviously, you're Devon and Cornwall Police. Are the riders in Devon and Cornwall sort of like getting an unfair advantage, or is this getting shared around fairly?
No. So it's been to bigger events such as this Motorcycle Live this week. It's been to the Formula One, the MotoGP, just to give people a look at what we're trying to do. And then it's been out to other forces such as Kent and Essex already, done some young rider days there. I'm now training, so I've trained officers from North Yorkshire, from some of the Welsh forces, and the idea is now that we can start moving this around the country and let them use it for young rider days and interventions. But like I said, it doesn't have to be young riders. If you are 40, 50, 60 something, I've had a 73-year-old female on it this week, and absolutely loved it. Some people will get sim sickness, we know that, because it's that whole thing of you're sat stationary and the world's being projected around you, which is a bit odd, and not everybody likes it. So that's another barrier we've got to overcome. Is actually, if that doesn't work for some people, how do we then look at that level of training for somebody that does get sim sickness, or how do we overcome it? So there's a few barriers we've yet to climb, and it's early days. We've had it since April. I know it's going to take a bit of work. Is it policing? It's a great engagement tool for us, for young riders. If I didn't have this, how many young riders would probably have not come and spoken to me this week, or sat on it and rode it, and me be able to pass on some information about hazards and driving around lorries and looking for buses and things like that. Probably a lot less if I didn't have this. So this, for an engagement tool for policing purposes, is fantastic for us, and fire service as well, because they work collaboratively with us. But I see this sat in rider training schools. Really, it's a learner training tool, and that's where its value lies with it.
So, in the immediate short term, is there sort of like a list calendar of events that you're going to have people book to have the experience on here? How does all that work?
So at the moment, Vision Zero Southwest, down in Devon and Cornwall, they are running the whole program for the diary, and people can book it up for their events through their local police force. So if their force is already trained in the use of it, and it goes to an event, for instance, a motorcycling event in their force, they'll be able to see on the diary system from there where it's going, when it's likely to be there. And then that force will operate it for that event, and then it will either come back to us or go to another force area. It's all battery operated, so we don't need mains, we just charge it overnight, but it's all battery operated, and it'll run for about 11 or 12 hours without having to plug it in. So,
is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered?
I think from my perspective is now pushing this into the limelight, if you like, at government level, and that's far beyond my pay grade. That needs to be people like yourselves, DVSA. They were in here this morning. and getting it really pushed out. And I suppose the biggest criticism I had, and I noticed when we put it out on social media, was, well, that way, you know, why are we trying to train motorcyclists on that? Kind of, unless us, it's our problem, because we didn't actually say what it was used for. We just said, look, we've got a motorcycle simulator. And actually it's stuff like this that gives me the opportunity to say, this is where it's aimed at, and this is the reasons behind what we're trying to achieve. And I don't think any motorcyclist in this country will look at me and say, that's a really bad idea. All the motorcyclists that I've had in here this week, I've had Dan sat down there as an experienced biker, and I've had son and daughter sat on here, and they're saying, please help my son or daughter because they want to ride a bike, just show them what it's like. Yeah. Even if that's just to either put them off or actually encourage them to ride a bike. But like a young girl this afternoon, laughing and joking, oh look, there's a kid running out in front of me. Okay, stop. We need to talk about how dangerous these things are. They're as dangerous as a loaded gun if you mistreat it. Yeah. Your driving licence is a privilege. If you abuse that privilege, you lose that privilege. It's there to you know, ensure you've got freedom and go out and do all the wonderful things on a bike. You've got to treat it with the respect it deserves. Yes. It will kill you if you mistreat it. You know? And it might not always be your fault. You don't give somebody a chance to see you, put yourself in the wrong position, and that's it. We don't get a chance to reset and go back into it again like doing this. So yeah, it's for me, it's not a replacement. It's a add-on that I'm saying there's another way to train all riders, not just youngsters. I see that fitting into pre-CVT, but actually, if we develop it so that it will counter-steer properly, it feels absolutely bang on the money for how a bike will feel. Why wouldn't you put an experienced biker on it and say, okay, let's go ride through a series of bends and let's just talk about positioning with no traffic. Yeah. Because before I go out and do it on the road with a police biker, I could put them on this and say, near side for a right-hand bend, and that's where you're looking across there. I can actually point to it on the telly. I can't do that in the bike. Yeah. So it's just a different way of doing things, and we've kind of got to look outside the box and go, actually, let's try something different. We've always done what we're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, like I say, the casualty statistics haven't improved over the last decade or so, have they? So it's clearly time for something innovative and different to be pushed forward. So I wish you luck with it, and hopefully we can help on the political side and see if we can get government to stop on it. Thank you.